You see that says 4 megapixels, right? 4.1. Hey, this is Scott Wynn-Kivowitz, a storyteller with a camera talking about all the things photographers like you and I are thinking about. And in this video, we are not talking about that stain on my shirt. You can thank my 2-year-old for that. That's right, we're not talking about that yogurt stain. We are talking about
the most important cameras that I own.
And it's not what you think. As photographers, we have our favorite cameras. My favorite camera right now is actually the Nikon Z6. I love it way more than my Nikon D850. But I don't use the Z6 for client work for photos. I still use my D850 because of that extra bump in megapixels that I have more leeway with in post-production with cropping and things like that. For video work, I still use the Z6, of course. It is way better for video than the D850 is. Eventually, I will replace the D850 with whatever is the successor to the Nikon Z7, whether that's Z7S or Z8, whatever it is. So here's the thing. We all have these cameras that we absolutely love, but my favorite, most important cameras are not the ones that you think. This is by far my most important camera. This is the Fuji Z1, and it's got a little light meter on top that is just in the hot shoe, so it comes off. I have the rapid winder here, which also acts as a grip, but there's no button over here, of course. This was my father's camera and was my first film camera. Now, this does not work anymore because there's major light leaks. I could, of course, have it fixed if I want, but I actually don't want this out of my possession. So I am basically leaving it on my shelf as a remembrance as to one of the reasons why I love photography. So that was my first film camera, but I also have my first digital camera. At one point, I actually thought that I misplaced it and lost it or something, and turns out that my parents had it. I must have let them borrow it for a trip, and it never came back. Well, it's back. This Olympus C40 Zoom. This bad boy has an f1.8 lens, and it has this ring that just screws onto the front that allows me to have a filter on front as well. It's a 46mm filter, and it's got a big zoom. The zoom actually fills this entire tube. Now, I don't have batteries in it, but it actually does take AA batteries, so that was pretty cool at the time that there was no rechargeable. But here was the kicker. This camera was great at 4.1 megapixels. This thing cost me, I think, around $1,200 at the time. This would be like a $200 camera if you were to buy it right now, if it was modern, of course. This took a secure digital card. This one's from SanDisk, and here's a funny story. I took this camera to the Grand Canyon, photographed a lot of pictures on it. Oh, I think it photographed in RAW, but it might have been a TIFF RAW. I took it to the Grand Canyon. I was on a trip to Las Vegas, and we went out to Grand Canyon and a bunch of sightseeing, and on the way back, the card was wiped. I didn't do it. Turned out it was the X-ray machine. Turns out that these smart disk cards aren't so smart after all. They couldn't withstand the X-ray machine. So I lost 128 megabytes of images, and I've had a couple of these cards. So there goes that. Still cool that I have it. Now, the third most important camera, and this one actually works and has film in it, is this one. This is my Nikon F. This was my grandfather's camera, and as you can see, it has a flash even attached to it with the mount at the bottom, and this flash is from Sunpack, and this is a regular viewfinder, but I do have a waist level viewfinder, which I actually put on a second Nikon F that I bought used just to display the waist level viewfinder, and that camera also works, but this one's more meaningful because this was my grandfather's, as was the lens attached to it. Same with the Fuji. That was my father's Fuji lens attached to that camera too. So after I upgraded the Olympus C40 Zoom to a digital SLR, I went to the Kodak DCS N14 Pro or whatever it was called. It was a 14 megapixel digital SLR that was extremely slow, extremely clunky, and it was horrible. But that's what I used. And that was also very expensive. I believe that was around $4,000 at the time. That now you can get a Nikon D5 for less. But there you go. The three most important cameras in my collection are not because of the ones that I actually use on a regular basis. It's more sentimental. What are the most important, absolute most important, your favorite cameras that you own? Comment, let me know, then click that subscribe button so you get my next video, which I publish every Monday and Thursday, whenever possible. You don't want to miss it.